City.
Actually, that's spot on.
It is spot on.
All the competition that try to compete.
Everything is spot on.
So this weekend, we saw the college football playoff shakeup, right? We saw the big SEC championship matchup between Georgia and Alabama. We saw Michigan win the Big Ten championship against Iowa. And then, of course, Cincinnati took care of business against U of H. So now that creates the college football playoff. The first round, we got the 1 seed Alabama against the 4 seed Cincinnati. And then we got the 2 seed Michigan against the 3 seed Georgia. So, Andrea, just your college football playoff, your thoughts, did they get it right, the 4 teams, and your early predictions going into the college football playoff?
I just want to say I'm so proud of Cincinnati. We had been wondering for the longest time whether or not, because they're not like this huge school, whether or not they would get in, even though they're the only undefeated team in, the college football playoff landscape. They've been so good and they've been doing everything that they needed. But man, how much of a victory is it that, oh my gosh, we got to this wonderful thing that our school people thought that they couldn't do. And then, oh yeah, by the way, you're playing Bama next. Like, what kind of thing is that for them? It's very unfortunate that that's the way the card shuffled out. And maybe it would have been better if Michigan ended up getting in that spot. But honestly, we knew that wasn't going to happen, especially with the way that Alabama did against that defense. Georgia's defense has been great. Their defensive line, honestly, probably should win a Heisman entirely because they're just that good at destroying plays, getting into the backfield, doing all these different things. So much so that they carried basically that entire Georgia team. The quarterbacking of Georgia isn't, the most spectacular. It's been that defense has been great. So for Alabama, Bryce Young to do what they've done and just consistently earn things. They've been shaky a while, against Florida. They weren't exactly the greatest, the A&M, they lost there. But for them to turn it around, especially after we saw them not do so hot in the Iron Bowl, not bone. It's impressive to see Alabama kind of correct itself. Again, we talk about doubting Bill Belichick, then we shouldn't doubt Nick Saban because he's the Bill Belichick of college sports. And so I'm interested to see what will happen in this Michigan game, the Michigan versus Georgia game, because, we love the defense of UGA. We'll see how they do against, Michigan, who has pretty good defense themselves. They're scrappy. Their running backs are great. Their offensive line is crazy in Michigan. So I'm excited to see how that offensive line does against that defense. We know Cincinnati's going to be smoked. They're just happy to be there, honestly. So I'm looking forward to probably seeing another UGA versus Alabama matchup. And again, I don't see it's inevitable, right? It's like Thanos, he is inevitable. Nick Saban is inevitable. They're probably going to win. And that's going to be great if you're a college football fan.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say this. Shout out to Baylor for winning the Big 12 championship the last second. Xavier Newman-Johnson, 55. Shout out to you. But long story short, I think they got the playoffs right. Having Alabama jump Michigan #1 for beating Georgia, that was about right. And having Cincinnati become the first non-Power 5 conference school to be in the playoffs, that's a big stepping stone. I'm rooting for Cincy, man. I want the underdog to win. I know it may not realistically happen, but Riddler's been playing great. They have a great defense. Myji Sanders coming off the edge, he's pretty good. Realistically though, if I had to pick, I would love to see Alabama and Michigan in a championship game. Jim Harbaugh against Nick Saban, that would be something. That would be something to see. And I only say that because Harbaugh has been criticized since he's been in Michigan. Never been able to beat Ohio State. Never been able to get the program where people have expected him to get. Now you beat Ohio State in the fashion that you beat Ohio State. You go to the college football playoffs for the first time. Put up or shut up now. Like, you got to go in there. You got to win. You got to beat Georgia. I know that's a tough team. Georgia's offense definitely looked a little bit, suspect over the weekend against Alabama, even though it's Alabama. But you use that film, you go into the week, you prepare for Georgia, you go in there, beat them, and then you play Alabama. Hopefully hopefully you may play Cincinnati. You never know. It's up in the air with me, but if I had to pick the championship game, I would pick Michigan, Alabama right now, and I'm gonna go with Michigan. I want Jim to get them haters off his back, man. I'm just gonna root for him. I know Bama's tough. Bryce Young, Heisman, definitely gonna win the Heisman, but I'm gonna root for Michigan this year.
Yeah, so those are definitely some good picks. First of all, I want to say congratulations to Cincinnati. I think if you've been following college football, just kind of the college football playoff, and this is a reason that it really needs to expand. We saw the TCU, right? The TCU that should have been in the college football playoff, and they got taken out. We've seen Boise State, right? UCF, teams like that go undefeated or have really good seasons. Even Cincinnati last year, right? And they kind of get looked at as, strength of schedule, or how would they fare against these teams in the Big Four. I think this year was the perfect year for the committee in the sense that the four teams kind of consensusly made sense, right? Like if you look at it, like Notre Dame had one loss, but their one loss was to Cincinnati, right? Oklahoma State, folded in the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma folded, right? There was just nobody you could make the argument for over Cincinnati this year. So I don't know if they wanted to put Cincinnati in, but they had to, right? When you talk about the Cincinnati and Alabama matchup, Cincinnati just happy to be here. You know what I mean? I don't think that game will really be competitive at all. And, that's when the committee will come out and be like, see, we told you so, but I've always been under the impression that if the team earns it, just put them in. If they get smoked, you did your job, right? You know what I mean? Go ahead.
Because think about it. I'm sorry. Think about it. How many times have we put Oklahoma in the championship game and they go and lose, or they go and get
Notre
smoked?
Dame?
So it's like Notre Dame.
Super disappointing.
So it's like give these teams a chance that go undefeated, because it's so hard to go undefeated, especially during a whole season. Then you go to a conference championship and you still that's hard. It's really hard to do.
Definitely. So I think Alabama and Cincinnati, I don't think that game will be close. I think Alabama was really dominant in their game against Georgia. Bryce Young had his Heisman moment. He had a few of them. It was one play where he was scrambling. He was about to get tackled. Then he pitched the ball backwards without even looking. He's so good. He made some crazy plays in that game. He's so poised. We obviously talked in the last segment about coaching and stuff. We know they have the coaching on lock with Nick Saban and stuff. The real interesting matchup that I really can't put a read on right now is that Michigan-Georgia matchup, right? You got two of the premier coaches in college football with Jim Harbaugh and Kirby Smart. Two really good defensive teams, two teams that really are focused on the running game and the defense. That's how they want to win the game, right? They're both teams that I don't say they have liabilities at quarterbacks, but they don't have quarterbacks that are going to go out and win you the game. The defense and the running game are going to be the factors in this game. And so you talked about that Georgia defense outside of the Alabama game, right? Because I know, we're going to have recency bias. Take out the Alabama game. This is a team that's given up 10 points a game, right? It's historically one of the best defenses ever. Throw the Alabama game out the window. That's a super rivalry game. You don't want to read too much into that, right? And then Michigan, like you said, Austin, we saw the fashion that they beat Ohio State in, right? And then I was one of the people that thought they may lay an egg against Iowa, and they went out and won 42-3, I believe. So, they're completely wrong about that. And I think Jim Harbaugh finally has the pieces that he needs. Maybe had a little bit of luck this year with this probably being the weakest Ohio State team he's played since he's been at Michigan. But both of those teams are really good, and only one can win. If I had to pick one, when in doubt, go with the SEC, right? So I'm going to go with the Georgia. I just think they're more battle tested. They've been there, right? Going to, the SEC championship almost every year, going to a couple championship games. So I'm going to go with Georgia. That leaves me with the all SEC national championship game between Alabama and Georgia. And then I think history repeats itself. I'm going with the chalk, right? When you just look at what Alabama has been able to do, what they continue to do, they don't rebuild, they reload. And like I said, if you look at when we talk about the two things that matter most to me, I think, in football, outside of turnovers, right, is quarterback play and coaching. And they have a clear advantage in those two, right? If you look at the four quarterbacks in the college football playoff and the four coaches in the college football playoff, like I said, Alabama has a clear advantage in both of those. So that's why I would go chalk and pick Alabama. But I do think the committee got it right, even though this was probably the easiest four teams they've ever had to pick since the college football playoff was implemented.
Yeah, and you talk about players getting smoked. I mean, who cares, right? Like you said, Austin. Like, I mean, like players, people who we think are going to be great, like Oklahoma, like they just end up being disappointing. So hey, chalk it up to whatever. But Austin, I don't know why you gassed up Cincinnati, saying they have a chance. They have absolutely none.
I mean,
none in the
every
world.
dog has his day. I'll say that. Every dog has his day.
If Auburn did as well as Alabama, then who knows, right?
I will say this about
that's one of the biggest rivalries in college football. You can't Auburn, you can't. You got to throw that out the window too.
Exactly.
Sure. Alabama. Cincinnati not sneaking up on Alabama at all.
But I do want to say, like, shout out to Jim, because people have been doubting him for a while. I mean, this is a guy who's done it in both levels, professionally and collegiately. And I think it was only a matter of time. And I think that this goes to show that, if you want to build a successful program, you can't just one and done it. You can't just like cycle through. You have to sit there. You have to commit to it, because good coaches, good players can find a way, and maybe you won't get it in your first 2 recruiting classes, but you establish a culture, you get things done, you can make things happen. So I'm really excited for Jim, especially people have been really like trash on him, but he's a successful coach. He's proven that he's been good. So I'm happy for him.
And I think he's had a successful season, and I know we're going to do it anyway, but if they lose to Georgia, I don't want to see him get criticized, right? Because Georgia was the number 1 team all year. They're going to be favored in this game, right? Like, he's made it to the college football playoff. This is the best and the best. Now, if they were playing Cincinnati, okay, Jim, I need you to go out there and win that game. But he beat Ohio State. They dismantled Iowa. They won the Big Ten championship, right? If they lose to Georgia, which may be a better team, I just don't want to see the media get on TV talking about Jim Harbaugh's failures again, and if they need to replace him, and is he the coach to take this team over the hump? Like, they've had a successful season already. So I just hope we're cognizant of that in the media and as journalists.
Yeah, because we don't hold that smoke to Lincoln Riley, man. Like, come on, like there are people who like who are really good who just can't get it to that next level.
Brian Kelly, been there for years. Went to 2 championships, one championship against Bama and got whooped, and then went to the playoffs against Clemson and got whooped. Like, and we keep putting them in there, but we're not going to talk about them when they lose.
I will say I have to give Brian Kelly a little leeway. I mean, he's at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? He's at a Catholic school. It's just only so much he can do, right? And he said this a little bit, like he kind of gave out a scoop when they said, why did you come to LSU? And he said, I wanted to be with the best. He wasn't just talking about going against the best. Yeah. He was like, I want the best. Like, I can't recruit them dogs to Notre Dame like I want.
Especially South Bend, Indiana.
To go to Notre Dame, you have to like pass like you have to be on point, like academically, like all of that. Like you can't just recruit anybody to Notre Dame. We know how LSU get down, you know what I mean? So I got to give Brian Kelly a little, you know what I mean? I got to give Brian Kelly a little pass, definitely, because he was up there at Notre Dame at a Catholic school where he really don't have much wiggle room, you know what I mean? And he was competing every year, up there in the top 4, top 5 every year.
And no discredit to him, he definitely was. But my thing is, was he deserving of being in those positions to win the championship? Like, even with the Manti Te'o, or even with a couple of years ago when he played against Trevor Lawrence, sometimes those teams have always been critical and like criticized, like, oh, okay, can they make it? Oh, okay, if they do make it, can they actually win? And every time they've always shown that they're not capable of beating the best of the best yet. But like you said, bro, no discredit, because South Bend, Indiana, I'm going to be real with you. No African-American wants to go to South Bend, Indiana over any other school.
Never would I ever. Except Chase Claypool. But he like Canadian or something. I don't know. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's y'all take. Let us know what y'all think in the comments, man, about the college football playoffs. Did they get it right? Who's going to win? Just early predictions. Let us know all of that.
We thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to check out more shows here on this YouTube page, such as SOS Discussions or My Point Exactly. And most of all,
keep watching Spot On Sports.
It's a new wave of sports that's sweeping the nation. We're not just accurate, it's spot on.